Now.
Welcome to Burnt Out. The Burnt Out podcast shares the stories of firefighters, emergency personnel, and other first responders around the world to create a pathway to save lives. The stories you will hear are real and may be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. And now I'd like to introduce you to your host for Burnt Out, a 33-year retired veteran of the fire department, Skip O.
Thank you, Sean, for the introduction. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Burnout Podcast. And I'd like to thank all our sponsors. And if you'd like to see our sponsors, burnoutpodcast.org. Go there. We got all our sponsors. And we got Jeff's on there. You can see his little bio. And Jeff couldn't be with us today, but he will be back. He is teaching paramedic school. So also, we'd like to thank our guest, Richard Ervin. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Skip. Appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you for putting up with all the audio difficulty we had last time. But you know what? Sometimes that enemy will attack, but just like a firefighter or a police officer, we don't let it beat us.
That's right.
Well, Richard, you want to give us a little brief description about a little bit where you're from, how many years you're on the department, and your family, and then we'll go into some questions. How's that sound?
Sounds good, Skip.
All right, go.
I'm from Danville, Illinois. I spent 27 years on the Danville Fire Department, retiring on my 52nd birthday on May 3rd, 2020. I also worked for 5 years for a private ambulance prior to that, for a total of 32 years in emergency services. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Lynette. Next month will be our 31st wedding anniversary. I have a 37-year-old stepdaughter, Chelsea, who's married and lives in Phoenix. She has 2 children, Noah and Ray. I also have a 30-year-old daughter, Kelby, who's married and lives in Brownsburg, Indiana, and she has 1 child. Our grandson, Theo, will be 2 in October.
Well, it sounds like you got a good family, and it sounds like you had a good life on the fire department. When you was first thinking about a firefighter, was that one of your dreams, or was that just something that just happened to come along?
No, it just kind of happened to come along through high school. I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then my first trauma in life, when I was 3 months out of high school, my dad passed away of a heart attack unexpectedly. And that kind of led me into the ambulance service. But I never really dreamed of being one. I always watched Emergency growing up like every other kid did. But my father's death kind of pushed me that way, and then became an EMT and paramedic, and then worked there for, like I say, 5 years, and then got hired on the fire department. And I was there for 27.
Okay, Richard, back then, when we had these runs, these events, was there any kind of peer support back then?
No. Mental health back in the late 80s and early 90s was hidden. Like I say, I had an older sister and a younger brother, and my mom was only 42 when my dad passed away, and that devastated our family. And looking back now, we all should have been in therapy right away, but we wasn't. It was never, it just wasn't in the forefront. So then you start going in the ambulance service and start going on calls, and people are dying, and you just kind of, suck it up, deal with it, or just, don't think about it for a while and push it down. The problem is all those traumas stack up, and eventually you get to where you can't take it anymore. And you end up having a mental meltdown like I did.
Sure. I tell you, a lot of people, when they come up with those different traumas, they deal with it in negative ways, alcohol, drugs, whatever that is. Did you have any of those occurrences early on or leading up to your mental breakdown?
Yeah, well, I never did drink through high school because my dad was there and he wouldn't let me. But once I started ambulance, your day off, you'd go out and have a few beers with the guys. Drank all through the fire department. The last 7 years spent on the department, I got moved up into the front office, which was a 40-hour week instead of a 24-hour shift. And the bad part about that was I'm home every night, and all those traumas had stacked up in my brain. And I was very angry, very irritable, short fuse. and I was drinking, 8 or 10 beers every night, and that's not healthy at all.
Well, Richard, leading up to when you finally knew you had enough, and you can always jump back if you need to on something, but leading up to about 2 months to when you had your mental breakdown, could you tell me about a bit about that experience?
Yeah, I ended up going diagnosed with bipolar manic behavior, along with anxiety, depression, and PTSD. So I never was suicidal in the beginning when I had my meltdown. I was manic, and I was running crazy thoughts, but in my mind it was all positive, and I'm going to change the world. But my wife and a couple of my close friends seen that I was running off the rails, and they corralled me one day and got me to the hospital. And it got so bad there at the end, I thought I had a brain tumor or something, because I'd wake up in cold sweats at night. I was losing my cognitive function where I couldn't read directions and put a light together. I went to the mall and got lost in the bookstore. I mean, I knew something was wrong, but I thought it might have been a brain tumor. And when they was doing a CAT scan on me, I was almost hoping it was a brain tumor, because that had been easier to explain than I went nuts. But all those medical tests come back just fine, and I got admitted on the behavioral health floor for 5 days. At which time my wife and daughter had learned of the Center of Excellence, the IAFF Center of Excellence out in Maryland, and they got me a bed. And I had a friend of mine fly me out there, and I spent 38 days there from April 26th to June 4th of 2021.
Well, let's go back. Walking into the Center of Excellence or the day before, how I know you weren't feeling good, but what was your thoughts, your thinking process going into this place? I know was there fear? Did you think you didn't need that kind of help? Was there any of that going on?
Yeah, well, after they ran all the medical tests at the hospital, they took me to the behavioral health floor. And the lady said, I need you to sign in, but you can't leave until we say you can leave. I'm like, okay, do a screening on me. I'm fine. Well, then I quickly realized that they wasn't going to let me go when I was there for 5 days. And I'd never heard of the Center of Excellence before. I had no idea what it was, but I was confused and frustrated. And they said, we got you a bed. Will you go? And I'm like, well, yeah, if it gets me out of the hospital, I'll go. So initially going in, I had no idea what to expect.
Well, that first week, could you describe the listeners, the Center of Excellence is a treatment facility in Maryland, like Richard said, for firefighters. Could you describe that first week, what happened and what they have you do?
Yeah, well, like I say, I left the fire department a very angry person. I was convinced everybody hated me. I'd lost the brotherhood feeling. That's kind of why I retired 3 years earlier than I wanted to. But when I stepped into the Center of Excellence, matter of fact, when I got in the van at the airport, the driver immediately started showing you love and telling you you're in the right spot. And like I say, once I got all checked in there, everybody was very supportive. And I didn't realize how broken I was until the first night I was there. They had their union meeting they have once a week. And I couldn't even stand up in front of 50 guys and tell them my name and where I was from and why I was there without breaking down.
Well, while you was there, did you have the other clients or the other firefighters there? Did they all support one another, especially the new people coming in?
Oh yeah. That place is amazing. They take you in. They assure you everything's going to be okay. But it's tough. Like I say, they had individual counseling. They had group therapy counseling. Once a week we had Zoom counseling with the family, and then they had the trauma group counseling, which was the toughest part. But once you got through that, you could really start putting these build up traumas away and clearing your mind out, and then rebuilding yourself.
Well, Richard, I know a lot of times they got people that are recovering from alcohol, drug. There's an addiction side, and then there's the mental side. And the trauma group, as you was talking about, could you tell people a little bit more in depth what you do at that trauma group, and what are they looking for?
Yeah, you sit there, you write out I think, three of your biggest traumas. And the first one was my father from back in 1986. And then the clinician has you write on the board every emotion that you feel or felt with that trauma. And then you scale that emotion 0 to 100 on how you feel at the moment. And it's like I say, my dad died back in 1986, and I couldn't get through that without breaking down because I'd never processed it before. I'd always just pushed it down. But then they talk you through it, and they help you process everything. And once you come out on the other end, then you feel a lot better about things.
Now, in the groups, are the groups big? Are they small? Or are you with the same people all the time? Or how's that work?
Yeah, the trauma group was only, I think, like 4 of us in there. So we're all hearing each other's traumas. And then when you're telling your story and the guy next to you gives his input that, hey, I can relate to what you're feeling, I know how you feel that way, then it helps you process things better.
Well, what's one of the breakthroughs you had when you're there? You know, all the stuff you did, the groups, the individual counseling, the Zoom meetings, the activities they got there, the eating, going down the rec room and eating together. With all those together, was there a certain break that you had that you knew you were getting better?
Yeah, well, the one that did it for me, and it took me a little while to process it, was they give you a class in group therapy on early childhood development. It's about how your brain develops as you're a child from like ages 0 to 2, 2 to 5, 5 to 12, and 12 to 20 or something like that. And it's how you're wired a certain way based on your childhood. And I had the hardest time figuring that out because I could understand that if a kid was physically or mentally abused as a kid. But I had the all-American family. I had a perfect childhood. And as I was laying in bed one night, I'm thinking, well, what does that mean? How I'm wired is my dad taught me nobody's going to give you anything. You have to work hard to succeed. And if you work hard and do the right thing, you'll be successful. And that's how I'm wired. Well, then I have his trauma in my trauma bucket right away at age 18. I never processed it. And I learned they describe it as a bucket or a cup. I use the term a bucket that fills up with your traumas. Well, then I get into the ambulance and I start going on calls, and you're doing the right thing and you're working hard and people are dying. And that's the opposite of how I'm wired. And with no mental health therapy back then, you just pushed it down. You went out drinking the next day or whatever, and they just keep stacking up and they keep stacking up. And over the 32 years, they stacked up to a point where the old phrase in serenity now, insanity later, that's exactly what happened to me. And I had my meltdown. But that's what helped me break through and realize why they affected me so bad, because of how I was wired.
Well, I tell you, I could, a lot of first responders that's been on here. I interviewed firemen, police, military, even nurses or emergency room nurses. The traumas, they had the same thing. Finally, it was that one trauma or that's overflowed their bucket. And then that's when they reached out for help because they didn't know what to do. And Richard, I'm proud of you for reaching out for help. That's great. But could you let everybody know when you graduated, went back home, what was the feelings going back home after you went through treatment?
Yeah, that's when they told you it's the beginning, not the end of your treatment when you graduate from that place. I was very confused. My mind was clear. I'd processed my traumas, but now I'm retired. I lost my identity. I was over medicated to start with. And I started sinking into a very dark time. I isolated myself. I went like 2 years before I could drive by a fire station again. And even my close friends, I just isolated. I continued in therapy and kept working hard. And I got a job at a best friend of mine who runs a paper wholesale store. So I got a job there in the warehouse. And I was on the roof one day. This is about a year and a half after I graduated the center. And I'd never been suicidal in my life, and I never really was suicidal, but I'm standing on the roof of that 3-story building looking over the edge, wondering how bad it hurt if I jumped, because I felt like I'd lost everything. And of course, as the devil, he'll attack you at your weakest moment. Here comes Engine 1, 2 blocks over, going on a call. He's saying, see what you used to be, and now you're nothing. Why don't you go ahead and jump? And it's right then I told him to be gone, to put it nicely. I wasn't going to live the rest of my life that way. So I started the slow crawl out of the hole. And the first thing I did was they give you a patch from the Center of Excellence, like one you can sew on your coat. And I had a fire jacket that had my name on it. So I had the patch sewed on my coat and had them stitch retired above the Danville Fire Department. Decided I was going to be proud to wear that coat, because I put in 27 years there and give it everything. But I was still anxious. I was very anxious. At this point, I'd had no contact with hardly anybody from the fire station. I didn't know what they were going to think of me. Were they going to judge me? All that stuff run through your head. Well, then a little bit after that, one of my best friends retired, was going to have a retirement party. And I wasn't about to miss that. So I told myself I'm going to that. And if I can back up for a minute, now's where God really worked his magic. Because I need to talk about my mother for just a minute. Like I say, she's the epitome or the textbook of resilience in my mind. She was 42 years old. She was a stay-at-home mom with a high school education when my dad died. He had very little to no life insurance, and she picked herself up at the age 42 and put herself through nursing school and got her LPN. And then she got remarried, and she was happy, because the other thing that I've been carrying with me all these years is the last thing my dad said to me before he went in for heart surgery is he said, if anything happens, take good care of your mom and your brother. So I've been carrying, it's not a burden, but it was a responsibility. That's my mom. Well, she got remarried and was very happy for, I believe, 9 or 10 years. And then her second husband had a spot on his lung, got cancer one day. They gave him 6 months to live, and almost 6 months to the day, he passed away. So we're going through all that again. And there's a corner in the cemetery there in Rossville, Illinois, where my grandparents, I have an aunt, an uncle, 2 cousins, and my parents and my stepdad are all there. I've been to that corner 9 times in my life. I've never processed any of those until just recently. So anyway, fast forward, my last few years in the front office at the fire station was very stressful because it was a toxic time. They were talking layoffs. We went from 4 stations to 3. We didn't have a fire chief. We had a public safety director who was a retired police officer, and his office was at the police department. And I mean, I could go on for days about that. But along with all that stress, my mom's health started declining. So now that's, I got to take care of mom. And we'd had end-of-life discussions several times over the years, and she never wanted to go to a nursing home. Well, the last year, my niece stepped up to the plate and was her caretaker. So she moved in with my niece. And that was a blessing. She went above and beyond to take care of my mom, to keep her out of the nursing home. But we wasn't at hospice yet, but it was getting close. Talking hospital beds, and she had an inoperable tumor, and she wanted no part of surgery because she didn't want to be in a nursing home. She wanted to stay there and be comfortable until she passed away. And November the 22nd of 2022 was her 79th birthday party. And that night, my brother and his wife and me and my wife and my niece's kids were all over there. And we had ice cream and cake, and my mom had a great day that day. And we got one final picture with her. And when we left, she said, I love you guys. I'm going to sleep good tonight. And then we left. And at 7 o'clock the next morning, I'm on my way to work. And my niece called me hysterical, said, "You got to get over here." And I knew exactly what had happened. And I got over there and walked in, and there she sat in her favorite recliner, and she simply went to sleep. Now, is that God's timing or what? But there's two other points I need to make with it, how God works miracles. Is November 30th was her date of death. November 30th was my dad's birthday. So how cool is that? It's like he said, "Good job, son. I got her from here. Go on, live your life." So I stood there for a minute, and then I had to go outside and call a coroner. So I make the phone call to 911, tell them who I was. I was retired from the fire department, told them my mom just passed away. I needed a police officer in the coroner. And of course, the dispatcher doing her job, she's like, "Well, do you need to start CPR? Is she breathing?" And all that. So I said, no, this wasn't totally unexpected. I just need a police officer in the coroner. She said, "Okay." So I'm standing outside the house, and what do I hear coming? I hear sirens in the distance, and they're getting closer. I'm thinking, here we go. And at this point, I'd isolated from everybody. I had no idea what people thought of me. And here they come. I heard them turning down the street, and they got closer, and they got closer. And up pulls engine 2. And I'm thinking, okay. And I'm asking God, why are you doing this to me right now? You know, I just 5 minutes ago was thanking him that he took mom peacefully. Now I'm questioning him. Why are you doing this to me? And up pulls engine 2. And when they got off, 2 guys on that truck that I worked with for 20 years, when they seen it was me, they dropped their EMS stuff. When I told them what had happened, they gave me a hug. And that was powerful. And that let me know guys still cared. And I processed my mom's passing. I came to a sense of peace. I attended my buddy's retirement party, had a great reception, a great welcome. I still struggle at times, but I'm well enough now to start telling my story to try to get the word out and try to help others that are struggling.
Richard, I tell you, that's a powerful story of, the sadness you lost your mom, but the relief and the thing that done for you. But for those guys just to happen to come to that run and be there for you, that's brotherhood right there. And I think that's miraculous. And, I'm always sorry somebody goes through pain, but what I am happy for you is that you had that reconnection with brotherhood and kind of rekindled your fire with your guys.
Exactly. And then a couple of weeks after the retirement party, I went up and ate breakfast with them one morning. I've done that a couple times. And I actually had my own retirement. I wrote a letter to the entire department explaining to everybody what had happened to me. And it wasn't too late to have a retirement party. So it was 3 years to the day I retired. I had one. I had a good turnout. Everybody's supportive. And like I say, I still struggle at times, but we're working on, I'm still in therapy. Looking back, I wish I'd have been in therapy all those years. I used to drink Miller Lite by the truckload, and I haven't had a beer in 2.5 years. I don't have that desire anymore. That's gone.
Well, there's something you do on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 8:00 Eastern. What did you do on those days to help get you through your days?
Yeah, well, the worldwide peer support, Zoom meetings. Like I say, go to worldwidepeersupport.org. There's a group of us. Most of us, it's all first responders, so everybody kind of knows where everybody's coming from. A lot of us graduated from the Center of Excellence, and we have different topics every night. You get on there and just talk about whatever's on your heart. If you're struggling, everybody picks you up, and just continue that brotherhood. It's pretty cool.
And was this year you went to FDIC? Was this your first year going to FDIC with the Worldwide Peer Support?
Yes, the first year at the Worldwide Peer Support. I'd been 20 years ago as a fireman, but no, this was the first year as a Worldwide Peer Support.
Well, how was your experience there? I know it was in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. You got like 30 plus 30,000 first responders all over the world, 62 countries there. What did you think about it?
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Like I say, the brotherhood, and I lost that brotherhood feeling. And now that I got it back, I want to keep it.
You got you a little project going, I think, too. Isn't it some kind of a book you're trying to write? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I've been told I should write a book. I'm not sure how to do that, but I've started putting a lot of my stories and traumas down on paper or in the computer. Well, one, it helps you process them. Journaling is something they encourage when you're going through stuff. I've got quite a few chapters written already. So I don't know. We'll see where that goes.
Okay, Richard, I like to. There's somebody that's on here, whether it's a firefighter, police, military, or just a first responder that might be struggling or thinking they might need help, or it might be a family member that somebody's struggling out here. How would you encourage them to get help? You got about 2 minutes to talk to them one-on-one right now. Go.
Yeah, I just say, hey, there's help out there. People love you. You just have to find it within yourself to have the courage to reach out. Come to the Worldwide Peer Support meetings. Find a church, close friends. There is help out there, and don't let the devil tell you otherwise, because he tempted me, and I was at a low point in my life. And suicide's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And things can get better. The road's not easy. You still got to put in the work. But life is definitely worth living.
Okay, Richard. I always ask the guests this. Is there, like, when you struggle is there a quote, a verse, or a saying from somebody that you've heard over the years that keeps you going when you hit that wall?
Yeah, it's actually a quote that is written on my parents' tombstone. It says, "A hug is a perfect gift. One size fits all, and nobody minds if you exchange it." And that hug from Will Hudson that morning, that pulled me out of the hole.
Richard, man, I tell you what, you got a good story, and we'll bring you back on, and we'll fill in the gaps of some other things that you'd like to share. But if anybody's out there, you go to worldwidepeersupport.org. And there's meetings Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Also, you can dial 812-646-9977. That's our number. That's a RIT team. Our first responders will answer if you need some help there. 812-646-9977. Or you can go to burnoutpodcast.org. Burnoutpodcast.org, and you can get a hold of us there. Message us there. We can connect you with Richard, and you can, if you want him to speak somewhere else, let us know, and we'll connect you to Richard. Richard, again, thank you for being on the show. Do you have any closing statements?
No, I appreciate you having me. And we gotta change the culture in the fire service. Let people know it's okay to ask for help. It's no different than we do medical screenings for cancer. This is just as important. We need yearly mental health screenings, in my mind. And that's what I'm going to try to help raise awareness for.
Well, thanks again, Richard. I think you're help changing that mindset of people by sharing your story. I'd like to thank everybody for listening to burnoutpodcast.org. Share Richard's story with everybody that you can. And remember, when you go home tonight, shut your phone off and your radio off and get some sleep. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Burnout. Burnout is brought to you by the Worldwide Peer Support. You can visit Burnout Podcast at burntoutpodcast.org or visit Worldwide Peer Support at worldwidepeersupport.org. Your host for Burnt Out is Skip O. Executive producer, Sean P. Neal. And produced by mypodcast.media.